Welcome back to True Crime Recap Central. Today, we're diving into one of the most high-profile and controversial cases in recent memory, the trial of Luigi Mangione. Known for his criminal activities that shocked New York City, Mangione's arrest and the media frenzy surrounding his case have raised numerous questions about justice, media influence, and the line between public perception and legal proceedings. But who exactly is Luigi Mangione, and what led him to commit such a crime? Let's look into it. Let's look into the crime. On the night of the tragic event, Mangione allegedly committed a heinous act that would forever change the lives of those involved. A brutal crime that left one victim dead and the city in shock. But was this just a crime of passion, or something far more calculated? As we piece together the details of this night, we must ask ourselves, what led Mangione to commit such an atrocious act? Was it a sudden outburst of violence, or was it a decision that had been building up over time? As authorities zeroed in on him, it became clear that this case was more than just another murder. With connections to organized crime, Mangione's life was steeped in violence, betrayal, and a network that stretched beyond New York City. But how much of this played a role in the crime? Let's look into the details of Mangione's background and try to understand the forces that may have influenced his actions. Let's look into the investigation. From the moment Luigi Mangione was apprehended, the investigation began unraveling layers of mystery. His arrest was nothing short of dramatic, with media outlets and the public scrutinizing every move of the NYPD. The authorities were quick to present the evidence: fingerprints, surveillance footage, and eyewitness testimonies. However, some argue that the high-profile nature of the case clouded the objectivity of the investigation. Was the focus on Mangione's connections and reputation skewing the case? Let's look into the evidence that led to his arrest and see if it truly points to his guilt. What stands out about this investigation, however, is the fact that it wasn't just about solving the crime. It became a spectacle. Mangione's face appeared everywhere. The media had its field day, turning him into an infamous figure even before the trial began. In fact, some critics claim that the way he was paraded in front of cameras was an attempt to sensationalize the case rather than simply seek justice. Let's look into how the media's portrayal of Mangione may have impacted public opinion and the investigation itself. Let's look into the trial. The courtroom became a battleground for truth and justice, with defense attorneys and prosecutors alike fiercely fighting over the fate of Luigi Mangione. On one hand, Mangione's defense team, led by some of the most high-profile attorneys in the country, argued that he was not guilty by reason of insanity. They painted a picture of a man whose mental state had been compromised by years of stress, trauma, and the criminal lifestyle he had led. They argued that he couldn't possibly have formed the intent to commit murder. But the prosecution wasn't about to let Mangione off so easily. They presented a rock-solid case of first-degree murder, showing that Mangione had a clear motive and intent. They painted him as a cold-blooded killer, whose actions were not the result of a breakdown, but rather a calculated decision to end a life. Let's look into the prosecution's arguments and explore whether they presented enough evidence to prove Mangione's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. The tension in the courtroom was palpable, and the public was on the edge of their seats, eagerly awaiting the verdict. But the case wasn't just about legal arguments. It was also about the emotional toll on those affected by Mangione's actions. The victim's family sat in the courtroom, hoping for justice. Let's look into the emotional impact this case had on the victim's family and the community at large. Let's look into the media influence. As the trial progressed, one factor became increasingly evident: the overwhelming influence of the media. The case was broadcast across news outlets, and social media exploded with opinions, theories, and rumors. The constant media coverage led some to believe that the case was being tried in the court of public opinion, rather than a fair and impartial courtroom. Was Mangione receiving a fair trial in a city that had already convicted him in the court of public perception? Let's look into how media coverage has shaped public opinion about the case. It wasn't just the sensationalism that was problematic. The NYPD's decision to have Mangione paraded in front of cameras during his arrest raised serious concerns. Was this necessary? Was it about making a statement or truly seeking justice? Let's look into the ethics of how law enforcement handled Mangione's arrest, and whether it was an attempt to influence the public's view of the case. Let's look into the charges. As we dig deeper into the charges against Luigi Mangione, we find that it's not just murder that he's facing. The prosecution has also charged him with terrorism, an addition that has raised eyebrows. Some legal experts believe the terrorism charge is an overreach, considering the circumstances surrounding the crime. Others argue that it's an appropriate charge given the severity of the act and its potential impact on public safety. Let's look into whether the terrorism charge is justified and what it means for the overall case. The addition of the terrorism charge brings a new dimension to the case. Could Mangione's actions be classified as terrorism, or is it simply a strategy by the prosecution to ensure a stronger conviction? Let's look into the legal implications of this charge and its potential consequences for Mangione. Let's look into the defense strategy. Mangione's defense team has been carefully crafting their strategy from the very beginning. The argument of insanity has been at the forefront, and it's one that has captured the attention of many. However, it's not just about presenting evidence of his mental state. It's also about challenging the prosecution's case. They've worked hard to discredit the evidence, arguing that it's circumstantial and unreliable. Let's look into the defense's strategy and whether it has a realistic chance of convincing the jury. One of the key figures in Mangione's defense is his lead attorney, a high-profile legal figure who has been involved in several high-profile cases. With connections to other celebrity cases, she's no stranger to the spotlight. But does her experience translate into success for Mangione? Let's look into the role of his defense attorney and the tactics she's using to sway the jury. Let's look into the public perception. Beyond the legal arguments and media coverage, the public's perception of Luigi Mangione is one of the most interesting aspects of this case. From the very beginning, he was painted as a villain, a figure to be feared. But is that perception accurate? Was Mangione truly a villain, or was he a product of his environment, a man who was shaped by the forces around him? Let's look into the broader societal issues that may have contributed to Mangione's criminal behavior. As the trial progresses, the public's opinion will continue to evolve. Some will argue that Mangione is guilty, while others will maintain that he was a victim of circumstance. But no matter what side of the argument you fall on, one thing is clear: this case is far from ordinary. Let's look into how public perception will affect the final outcome of the trial. Let's look into the verdict and what's next. As we await the verdict in the case of Luigi Mangione, there's a palpable sense of anticipation. Will he be found guilty of murder? Or will his defense team succeed in convincing the jury that he was not responsible for his actions? And what about the terrorism charge? Will it stick? Or will the court side with the defense? Let's look into what the potential outcomes of this trial might be and how they could impact Mangione's future. One thing is certain: this case will have far-reaching consequences, not just for Mangione, but for the way we view crime, justice, and the influence of the media. As the legal battle continues, we'll be right here to bring you the latest updates and insights. Let's look into the future of true crime cases and how they are likely to evolve in the years to come. The case of Luigi Mangione is more than just a high-profile murder trial. It's a story about the intersection of law, media, and public perception. As the trial continues, the world watches, and the questions grow ever more complicated. Was this a simple case of murder, or does it reveal deeper issues about society, justice, and the criminal justice system? Let's look into how this case might shape future legal precedents and what we can learn from it. Thank you for watching True Crime Recap Central. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more updates and analysis of the most shocking true crime stories.